Hello everyone and welcome to my Soap Twist 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Remy stood in the center of the sumptuous living room, hands quivering at his sides and black eyes locked on the floor. The crystal chandelier above cast a shattered light across his face, highlighting the pain engraved into his features. Across from him, Dake and Electra perched on the edge of the velvet sofa, stunned. The words Remy had just said hung in the air like a huge storm cloud, impossible to ignore. "I'm a Forrester," he murmured, his voice shaking with the weight of the truth. "My mother, her name is Felicia Forrester." The quiet was deafening. Dake's jaw stiffened, and his piercing blue eyes narrowed as he processed the information. Electra's hand flew to her mouth, swallowing a cry, her auburn hair catching the light as she shook her head, stunned. The room felt smaller, as if the walls were closing in, engulfing them all in the gravity of Remy's confession. Felicia Forrester. The name evoked a lineage, a history woven into the fabric of Los Angeles's most powerful fashion family. Felicia Forrester, Eric and Stephanie's intriguing daughter, had always been a mysterious and alluring presence. Her life had been a tapestry of accomplishments and sorrows, and her presence was both enticing and fleeting. But to learn that she was Remy's mother, a young man who had just recently entered their life, a quiet artist with no obvious connections to their world, was unfathomable.
How?
Dake eventually managed, his voice low and harsh, like gravel underfoot. "Remy, how is this possible?" Remy's shoulders stooped, his gaze fixated on the floor, as if bearing the weight of a lifetime of secrets. Felicia had never mentioned having a son. He swallowed hard, Adam's apple bouncing in his throat. "She didn't know," he whispered gently, scarcely heard through the rain. "Not for a long while. Not until it was too late." Electra leaned forward, her green eyes filled with unshed tears. "What are you saying, Remy? How could Felicia not have known she had a child? You're her son. How does something like this remain hidden?" Remy raised his head, and intense pain in his eyes hit them both like a physical blow. "Because I was taken from her," he explained, his voice breaking. "Because someone decided she wasn't fit to be my mother." The story flowed out of him, halting and jagged, like fragments of a broken mirror being patched together. He told them about Felicia, who was young and irresponsible, caught up in the tornado of her own goals and the pressures of the Forrester name, many years before his birth. She had fallen in love with Julian, a painter who lived on the outskirts of society, away from the sparkle and glamour of the Forrester business. Their love had been intense, all-consuming, and doomed from the beginning. Julian was a dreamer, disconnected from the reality of wealth and power, and Felicia's family had disapproved. They considered him as a threat, a distraction from the path they had planned for her. Felicia was only 20 when she became pregnant, and she was still trying to figure out where she fit in. She wanted to keep the child and start a life with Julian, but her family had other plans. Eric and Stephanie, determined to preserve the Forrester legacy, intervened. They convinced Felicia that she was too young and unstable to rear a child. They told her that the kid would be cared for and put with a loving family away from the upheaval in her life. Felicia, heartbroken and overwhelmed, gave in, signing away her rights amid tears and sorrow. However, the truth was worse than Felicia had been led to believe. The newborn, Remy, was not put with a loving home. Instead, he was handed over to Clara, a distant cousin of the Forresters, who raised him in a small, run-down apartment on the outskirts of LA. Clara was gentle but shattered, troubled by her own failures, and Remy grew up in a state of quiet neglect. There were no lavish Forrester parties, designer clothing, or a sense of dynastic belonging. There was only Clara, her whispered stories of a mother who had rejected him, and Remy's never-ending heartache. "I grew up thinking she abandoned me," Remy remarked, his voice full of sadness. "Clara informed me that my mother did not want me and that she prioritized her work above mine. I believed that for many years. I despised her for it." Electra's tears streamed down her cheeks. She reached out, her hand floating in the air, wondering whether to console him. Remy, it is dreadful. How did you discover the truth? Remy pulled his lips into a sour smile. Last year, Clara got sick. Cancer. She didn't have long, and I believe the guilt eventually got to her. On her deathbed, she told me everything. She told me about Felicia, the Forresters, and how they stole me away to protect their cherished name. She handed me a letter that Felicia wrote to me before I was born. She never got to hug me. Dake jumped up quickly and crossed the room, raking his hand through his dark hair. This is insane, he mumbled. Felicia is back in Los Angeles. For years. She's been working at Forrester Creations and living her life, but no one has told her she has a son. No one bothered to inform you? Remy shakes his head. Clara claimed it was better this way. She stated Felicia had moved on and had made a life for herself without me. But I couldn't let go. I needed to know her. I had to know why. The rain outside appeared to get louder, a constant cadence that mimicked Remy's heartbeat. He came to Los Angeles 6 months ago, determined to find Felicia and confront the woman who had abandoned him. He hadn't expected to discover a family so caught up in their own problems and secrets. He hadn't expected to find Dake and Electra, two people who had welcomed him into their circle but were oblivious of the truth he was carrying. I got a job at Forrester Creations, Remy said, his voice firmer now, as if admitting had relieved him, if only somewhat. I worked in the art department sketching designs with my head down. Felicia, I watched her from a distance. She exceeded my expectations in every way. She appeared strong, yet there was a melancholy in her eyes, as if she was carrying something she couldn't describe. Electra said softly and trembled. Have you ever spoken to her? Have you told her who you are? Remy's face crumpled, and for a brief time, he resembled the lost youngster he was all those years before. I tried. I visited her workplace once, last month. I still had the note she had written in my pocket. I was going to present it to her and explain everything. I couldn't do it after seeing how alive she was, how she joked with her colleagues, and how she carried herself like nothing could touch her. I couldn't tear her world apart. Dake paused, his gaze softening as he stared at Remy. You were protecting her, he explained quietly. Even after everything, you were protecting her. Remy laughed shakily and without amusement. I'm not sure if it was protection or cowardice. All I know is that I have spent my entire life wondering why I am not enough. Why didn't she fight for me? And now that I know the truth, things are worse. She was forced to give me up, not because she chose to. And I've despised her for something she did not do. The room grew silent again, the weight of Remy's words hanging over them like a shroud. Electra stood, crossed the room to him, and did not hesitate. She placed her arms around him and drew him into a tight embrace. Remy stiffened at first, unaccustomed to such compassion, but eventually melted into her, his shoulders quivering as he fought back sobbing. You're enough, Electra whispered furiously. You have always been enough, Remy. Felicia deserves to know you. She deserves to know her kid. Dake watched them, his emotions at odds. He'd known Felicia for years, seen her strengths and weaknesses, but he'd never expected this. The Forresters were a secretive family, with a glittering empire that concealed a myriad of misdeeds. And now there was Remy, a living witness to one of their worst moments. What happens now? Dake inquired, his voice level but filled with apprehension. Are you planning to tell her? Remy drew away from Electra, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand.
I don't know, he said.
Part of me wants to walk away and let her live her life without this bomb going off. But another part of me wants to know her. I'd like to know what it's like to have a mother. Electra took his hand and gently squeezed it. You don't have to decide tonight, she said. But whatever you decide, we're here. You're no longer alone, Remy. You're one of us. The words struck Remy harder than he expected, and for the first time in years, he felt a spark of optimism. It was frail and transient, but it was present. He looked at Electra, then Dake, their expressions a mix of amazement, compassion, and determination. They were his pals, his newfound family, and they now knew the truth. The question was whether he had the fortitude to confront Felicia and reclaim the heritage that had been stolen from him. Rain continued to fall outside, a constant reminder of the storm within. Remy's heart bled from the weight of his history, but for the first time, he felt hope for the future. Not one free of pain. Pain was a part of who he was, a part of his legacy, but one where he could finally fit in. The days that followed were a flurry of indecision and quiet moments of thought. Remy went through the motions at Forrester Creations, sketching designs in the art department with a precision that contradicted the chaos in his mind. Every time he passed Felicia in the corridors, his heart lurched with a combination of love and anxiety. She would smile at him, politely and professionally, unknowing that the young man in front of her was her son. Dake and Electra preserved his secret, which weighed severely on them both. Dake, ever the pragmatist, encouraged Remy to confront Felicia, face the truth, and deal with the repercussions. "You can't keep living in the shadows," he told me one evening over coffee in a quiet cafe. "You are a Forrester, Remy. That means something. It's time you claimed it." Electra, on the other hand, was more reserved, understanding Remy's anguish. "You need to do this on your own terms," she informed him, her voice kind but stern. "But don't delay too long. The longer you carry this alone, the heavier it becomes." Remy listened to each of them, caught between their advice and his own concerns. He kept Felicia's note in his pocket every day, the paper worn and wrinkled from many reads. She had put her heart into it, her words a monument to a love she had never been permitted to express. She had written, "My darling child, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I want you to know that I love you. I will always love you, even if I cannot be with you. You are my heart, hope, and everything." Those words tormented him, a reminder of what had been lost but could still be recovered. But the fear of rejection, of seeing Felicia's sorrow when she discovered the truth, held him back. What if she doesn't want him? What if the years had hardened her heart towards the child she had never known? Remy found himself standing outside Felicia's office one evening as the sun set below the horizon, staining the sky in bruised purple. The building was silent, with the usual bustle of Forrester Creations replaced by an unnerving silence. He saw her through the glass door, her silhouette crouched over a sketchpad, her hair falling softly over her face. She appeared worn and fragile, and Remy recognized himself in her. The same quiet intensity, the same desire to create something beautiful in an often brutal world. He gently knocked, his heart beating in his chest. Felicia looked up, startled, and grinned as she spotted him. "Remy," she said, her voice heated. "What brought you here so late?" He walked inside, his hands shaking as he gripped the note in his pocket. "I need to talk to you," he whispered quietly. "It's important," Felicia said, setting down her pencil and changing her demeanor to one of care. "Of course," she replied, nodding toward a chair. "What's wrong?" Remy sat, but the words would not come. He glanced at her, the woman who had given him life and loved him from afar despite never meeting him. The weight of the occasion pressed down on him, and he felt tears well up in his eyes. "Remy," Felicia prompted, leaning forward. "You are terrifying me. What is it?" He took a deep breath and tightened his fingers around the letter. "There's something you need to know," he finally stated. Felicia frowned, confused. "Us," she echoed. "Remy, I don't understand." He withdrew the letter from his pocket, his hands trembling as he handed it to her. "This is yours," he stated, his voice breaking. Felicia took the letter, her fingertips brushing against his. "You wrote it to me." She slowly unfolded it, her attention searching the familiar script, and her face became pale as she read. Her breath caught, making a quiet, broken sound, and as she looked up at Remy, her eyes filled with tears. "No," she said softly, her voice shaking. "It can't be you're my—" "I'm your son," Remy exclaimed, like a dam breaking. "I am the child you thought you lost." Felicia's palm shot to her mouth, and she sobbed. She stood, her chair screeching against the floor, and crossed the room in an instant, grabbing Remy in her arms. He flinched at first, overwhelmed by the suddenness of her embrace, but then melted into her, his tears flowing freely. "I didn't know," Felicia wailed, her voice muffled by his shoulder. "They told me you were gone, and with a decent family. I never stopped thinking about you, never stopped loving you." Remy clutched to her, years of agony and need spilling out in that one moment. "I thought you didn't want me," he murmured. "All my life, I thought you didn't want me." Felicia drew back, cradling his face in her hands, her gaze seeking his. "I wanted you," she declared vehemently. "I wanted you more than anything. They took you from me, Remy. They snatched you, and I'll never forgive them." Mother and son stood there, holding each other, their tears mingling, the weight of their shared tragedy binding them together. Outside, the city lights glimmered through the rain, offering a peaceful promise of healing and hope. But for the time being, there was only this moment, this fragile, lovely reunion of a mother and son who had spent their entire lives separated. Dake and Electra would hear the story later and notice the difference in Remy's eyes and the lightness in his step. They would support him as he navigated his new role within the Forrester family, facing the inevitable inquiries and scrutiny. But for now, in the stillness of Felicia's office, there was only love and the bittersweet ache of a family reunited. Remy stood in the midst of the design room, his hands quivering slightly as he looked at the sketches sprawled out before him. His eyes, deep green and stormy, flew over every line and detail bearing the Forrester name, a name that had been both his greatest inspiration and his saddest torment. Across the room, Dake Forrester leaned against a drafting table, arms folded, his sharp eyes following Remy's movements with silent interest. Dake was more than just Forrester Creations' heir apparent. He was the company's iron spine. He was calculated, composed, and confident, and he never welcomed surprises. Electra, on the other hand, sat gently on a stool beside the mannequin stand, sketchbook open but undisturbed. She was the trio's spark, bold, imaginative, and fearless to express herself. Even she knew that something peculiar was in the air. Remy had called the meeting personally, which he did not do very often. And when he did, his voice had a faint, intentional quiver that Dake and Electra couldn't ignore. "Remy," Dake finally replied, his tone calm but impatient. "You've kept us waiting for nearly 20 minutes. If this is about the spring collection, you could have just sent an email." Remy exhaled shakily, his eyes meeting Dake's. Dake arched an eyebrow. "It's not about the collection." "Then what is it?" Electra moved forward slightly, her gaze sharpening. "Remy, you look pale. What's happening?" Remy paused. Words accumulated in his throat like stones, becoming heavy, chilly, and impossible to swallow. He reached for one of the sketches and traced his fingertip across the Forrester logo. It was a basic design, but to him, it represented everything. "For years," he said softly, "I've operated under this identity. I've admired, respected, and even feared it." Dake grimaced. "We all do. It's what made our lives possible." Remy nodded faintly.
Yes.
"However, for me it is different. Because it's also who I am." Electra blinked, perplexed. "What are you talking about?" Remy's throat tightened, and his heart pounded in his chest. He looked up, and for the first time, the entire weight of reality crushed against his ribs, making it painful to breathe. "I'm a Forrester," he muttered. The hush that ensued was almost terrible. The hum of the lights appeared to recede, leaving only the silent tick of the clock on the wall. Dake's jaws constricted. "What did you say?" Remy's voice faltered, but did not crack. "I said I'm a Forrester. My mother's name is Felicia Forrester." The words hit like thunder. Electra's palm flew to her mouth, and her notebook tumbled on the floor. "Felicia? You mean Felicia Forrester? Eric's daughter? That is inconceivable." Dake's expression darkened, his blue eyes narrowing to steel. "You'd better have proof before you start throwing around names like that." Remy swallowed and took a worn envelope from his jacket pocket. He moved it across the table surface. "This comes from her. A letter she composed before departing Milan. She never told anyone, including her father." Dake did not move to touch it. He merely stared at Remy, studying every emotion that flickered behind his eyes. "So you expect us to believe that Felicia Forrester had a child in secret?" Dake continued slowly, his tone sharp. "And that child just happened to work at Forrester Creations, under the same roof, without anyone knowing?" If you want to see the second part of this, please leave your thoughts in the comment section.